Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real-time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. I am super excited about our guest today. He's an endurance coach, a keynote speaker, consultant who empowers individuals and groups to reach their goals in business, education, athletics, and in life. He's a two-time author. First book was A Mile at a Time, and then an award-winning book, The Ultra Mindset. Podcast host of the Travis Macy Show. Please welcome Travis Macy. Welcome, Travis.
No, thanks, Greg. It's awesome to be here with you and the audience. I appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. And your book arrives in my doorstep tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to getting into that.
All right. I hope you like it.
I'll let you know for sure. So on this podcast, we focus on endurance and endurance mindset. And I'd love to know, Travis, can you tell me about how your endurance mindset has impacted your life unexpectedly?
Well, that's a good question. I guess the long answer is in the book called The Ultra Mindset, which kind of explores this topic in particular. How has what I've learned as an endurance athlete unexpectedly impacted my life? I mean, I feel like a lot of the takeaways are sort of expected. But one maybe that's a little bit ironic or surprising is I went through a very challenging period of transition where I was grappling with my athletic identity, and really the gist of the question was sort of who am I if I'm not either standing on the podium or pursuing the podium as an elite athlete does. There's always a big race around the corner. There's always that achievement orientation and that goal of hitting the next podium or the prize money or the, sponsorship, et cetera, et cetera. And, probably starting about 5 or 6 years ago, I kind of realized like, hey, maybe that's, not the phase of life I'm in anymore, but there was a void of like, who am I if not? And it was a really, it was a hard period, Greg. But I think again, back to your question, in that case, unexpectedly, the resilience and I would say flexibility, as an endurance athlete, especially these long dynamic events, you have to be flexible. You know that the plan is going to go to shit and you're just going to have to figure stuff out. Unexpectedly in that process of grappling with my own athlete identity and therefore grappling with my, holistic identity, all the parts of myself, being an endurance athlete, it prepared me for that. It prepared me to, one of my sayings, I got this from my dad, is keep the faith. It prepared me to keep the faith in myself. And hey, even though this is a very hard period right now, believe in yourself and you can and will figure it out.
Travis, you really hit on something for me because I'm struggling with that identity as well. In fact, 2 weeks I'll be racing Ironman Wisconsin.
All right.
And for the previous 7 Ironman races, I've competed with my wife. So we've trained together, we've competed together. We've got these bibs that say triathlon parents, like we've met.
Oh, cool.
And I'm going out there alone this time, right? It's no family, no kids, no Monique, no. And just yesterday, I'm sitting there going, like, I feel sort of lost. So your point is really well timely for me. And I'd love to hear like how you did get through, or how you are getting through that identity of, hey, I used to be X and now I'm going to be Y. Talk to us about sort of the feelings that built up and how you got through it.
Yeah. Well, Greg, good for you on navigating the waters of uncertainty that's it sounds like here's a type of race that you've done before, but maybe it's a different why. It's a different process. That's tough. So, something that's fresh on my mind, I actually just finished talking with an author named Brad Stolberg, who has a book coming out. It's called Master of Change, How to Excel When Everything is Changing, Including You. And his book is about exactly that. Like, okay, we're all changing. And his advice in the book is that when we navigate these periods of disruption and then move back towards a reordering, that when we go for that reordering, it doesn't have to be the same, right? We're not trying to get back to how things were. We're seeking a new stability, and that's okay. So, again, I'm taking someone else's idea here, but I really like that idea of like, okay, instead of trying to get back to where I was or what was the why before, being open to, what's a new one here? What does that look like? Okay, if this was a thing that we did together as a team, like, well, maybe it's what is the new team? Maybe you found that you enjoy the community and the human connection. Maybe there's new human connection, other people on the course or people you're connected to from afar, or the podcast audience, right? That's one reason I love podcasting with myself is because it's like, we got this whole team, we're in this together. I can imagine your listeners, they're probably part of your journey. So, yeah, redefining that why and just being okay with a new sort of status quo. And that's another big one. I don't know, you mentioned triathlon parents. I don't know how old your kids are, but like, hey, talk about another change that we navigate. Like, as soon as you think you got parenting figured out a little bit, like your kids are older and you're older. And then at some point, they're out of the house, and like, boy, that's a big change, a good thing, a bad thing, probably a bit of both, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, my oldest is a high schooler for
Yep.
1 week now, and that
Oh,
is
wow.
a
Yeah.
huge change,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yep.
anyway, that's a whole other podcast that we could get
Yeah.
into.
No, I hear you. Yeah. Both of my kids are in middle school right now for the first time. And yeah, I mean, I'm all of a sudden starting to think like, wow, we're kind of closer to the high school ending, right? Than the beginning of it all.
That's right. So, Travis, I'm curious. Speaking of our children,
Yeah.
what do they see Dad doing? My kids probably think my wife and I are crazy for these long
Uh-huh.
endurance days that we put them through as well, and it's even harder as a spectator than it is as
Yeah.
the athlete, in my opinion. I'm curious, how do your kids react or see, or like when you're doing these adventure races, what's their perspective?
I mean, first of all, they're kids first and foremost. And I personally, I try, and I don't know if I'm always, successful per se, but I really try to like not push my interests on my kids. And, if they gravitate towards these things, or if we can spend time together going out on a run or a bike ride, I mean, yeah, that, you know, fills my well because I enjoy it. But I also I want to really make sure to support whatever their own interests are or are not. That said, I mean, I don't know, like I've been an endurance athlete for their entire lives. And when they were, my kids are 10 and 12 now, like when they were very young, I was racing and competing internationally at a very high level with running and mountain biking and adventure racing. And they got to go on a lot of those trips as little kids. And how much of that do they remember or not remember? I don't really know. They got to go to Fiji. I guess that was about 4 years ago now. So they remember that, and that was super cool. That was for a big adventure race that I did with my dad. So I'm really glad they were able to, do that up front, and they got to meet Bear Grylls, which they thought was pretty neat and stuff. And then overall, I've raced less, just different point in my life. Also kid activities. I mean, your kids start, it's like, Greg, your kids, especially if they start playing sports and stuff, it's like, boom, here's the weekend schedule, where do my events fit in? And generally I feel proud to be at a phase of my life where I enjoy that. And what do they see? I think as far as the main benefits, they see consistency, they see health. Like, they like, you don't talk about it that much, but like they probably notice every day I go running or biking and, they see me being healthy and fit. They got to, my wife, Amy, and my kids came this year to the Leadville 100 bike race and crewed for me. And that was great because, the Leadville events are super special in our family and, it's a good close to home event and the crewing's pretty simple. Just go to one place and give me some water bottles and stuff. So, it's great to have them along.
Yeah. I mean, it's something special too when you get to that finish line, the starting line as well, but you get to the finish line and those first few hugs, it's amazing. So anyone out there who hasn't raced with family,
Mhm.
I would highly encourage it. It does make the logistics a little more complicated, especially
Yeah.
with very little kids.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
certainly worth it.
I'm a huge fan, just real briefly, of kids watching finish lines of endurance events, even if their parents aren't competing, something like an Ironman or, 100-mile running race. Like, man, for kids to watch people finishing the final hour or whatever before a cutoff, like, boy, talk about just kids seeing adults persevering and navigating uncertainty. How can that not impact a kid? Whether or not they ever, turn out to like running or not themselves, that's not the point. It's just I think a cool thing to see.
I completely agree. Completely agree. Travis, thinking about the business side of the equation and this endurance mindset, where have you seen similarities between your endurance racing and building your business and consulting?
Mhm.
Draw those lines together for us.
Well, I mean, one obvious connection is that the core of my income is coaching adult endurance athletes. So that, that's been a very obvious, just natural extension of my life as an athlete. And, years ago when I first came out of college, I was a high school teacher, for 7 years. And I feel very fortunate that, I've always loved teaching. I love pedagogy. I love thinking about how to teach and how to differentiate instruction. And now to get to do that as a coach of athletes is it's like, oh, I get to teach what I really enjoy as well. And that's another reason I like podcasting and writing books as well. So, in some ways I've been able to maybe take again that mentality of, you're talking about ultra running or adventure racing, these long events where you just kind of have to figure things out and fly by the seat of your pants. That's to a large extent how I've addressed business as well, kind of a step at a time. Oftentimes it's been less of ready, aim, fire and more of, fire and then like chase the bullet and try to figure it out. And, sometimes that works, sometimes it fails. But overall it's worked out fine for me again with coaching, with speaking and consulting, with the podcasting. Writing books has been a good extension of it. So yeah, I see a lot of overlap, and I'm also interested in, that question. Sometimes it's simple. Let's say someone's going to deliver a keynote or a workshop to say like, oh, here's what I learned as an athlete, and do these same things in your conference room or in your company or whatever. And there's not always a direct overlap. So I think it's worth considering like what carries over and what doesn't carry over. Some things will, a team orientation or, the importance of showing up day after day or, certain mindset principles. Some of those resonate and others may not.
Certainly. I find a lot of parallels between running a small business and doing consulting work for small businesses and endurance racing. And it's amazing
Yep.
to me that they both sort of ebb and flow at the same time, right? If I've laser focused on my training and dialed in, I'm also laser focused on business and dialed in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you've seen similar with, groups that you've spoken in front of or consulted with.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe just a key takeaway. I'm sure it's true for you and me who love endurance sports, and like, we feel bad, right, if we don't get a chance to, to do this stuff. I think, people who've tapped into that, they realize like hey, if I am keeping my routine as an athlete, it's giving me stability amidst change. It's given, literally every day. It's putting my mood and my outlook and my energy in a much better state.
Mhm.
To bring it to the office or to your family or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I know for me, one of the best things I can do for my professional productivity and just again for my mood and my presence with my family is to go outside and exercise first thing in the morning. you know, so that's what I do pretty much every day.
Yeah, very well said. Shifting gears a little bit, Travis, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your books. Just about a mile at a time, and then ultimately, let's get into the ultra mindset.
Yeah, or maybe I'll shift the order there. So the Ultra
Yeah, fair
Mindset
enough.
was my first book. It came out in 2015. The subtitle was "An Endurance Champion's 8 Core Principles for Success in Business, Sports, and Life." So, kind of these, we're going for this stuff exactly what we're talking about. Each of the 8 chapters begins with hopefully a fun and interesting narrative from the world of endurance sports. It could be running or biking at the Leadville 100 events. It could be an adventure race, in China or Abu Dhabi or some other place. Maybe it's a training experience or adventure, and then it leads into specific mindset principles that I think are these ones I chose because I think they're largely applicable to our experience as endurance athletes, but hopefully you know relevant beyond that as well. It could be in the workplace, could be just in your life in general. It could be in your role as a parent or spouse, etc. And then more recently, our book that came out this year in March is called A Mile at a Time. And the subtitle there is A Father and Son's Inspiring Alzheimer's Journey of Love, Adventure, and Hope. And so, again, another nonfiction book. This one is a bit more, uh, whereas the Ultra Mindset is somewhat memoir, but also quite prescriptive. A Mile at a Time is more of a memoir, with some, kind of light, prescriptive content, but, mostly a story, and really the main characters is my dad, Mace, and, it's about his life and his journey as an athlete and a parent and a professional. And then, finally, and starting in 2018, his journey and our journey through Alzheimer's.
Mhm. Um, Shifting gears again slightly, Travis, tell me about you. Like, go as far back as you want to, but how did you end up getting into endurance racing, into podcasting, into public speaking? Like, rewind the clock and let's get the audience to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, I mean, the endurance racing, honestly, it's kind of something I've grown up around to a large extent. My dad, he did the Ironman in 1986, so I would have been 3 at the time, and my dad and I actually got to interview Mark Allen on our podcast, and so Dad and Mark Allen both did the Ironman in '86. And I can't read. That was one of Mark Allen's early attempts. I think Mark. I think he won the first time in '89 or something. So anyway, just kind of setting here's the time span, and then yeah, a couple years later in 1988, my dad did the Leadville 100 run for the first time. So I was a 5-year-old kid standing out there in the cold at Leadville at 4 a.m., watching this old cowboy King Kluber shoot the gun off. And I mean, I'm kind of laughing because actually I took my kids were at the start this year, cheering for the runners out there. And, but anyway, Ken, this guy, if you're familiar with the ultra running world, Ken Kluber. And, for years he's been saying these things like, you're better than you think you are. You can do more than you think you can, grit, guts, determination, all this kind of stuff. And even as a little kid, man, that Greg, it resonated with a part of me. And I was like, man, I love this stuff. And So anyway, I was also just a normal kid playing soccer, basketball, baseball, all that kind of stuff. Late in high school, I kind of realized that I really liked running, and I was also a much better runner than a ball sports athlete, and so pursued running for a couple years at CU Boulder on the cross country and track teams, and then joined the club triathlon team there for a year, my junior year, and then sort of starting my senior year of college, shifted my focus to the sport of adventure racing, which for listeners who aren't familiar, you can look it up, look up Eco Challenge or other things. Adventure racing is this really, somewhat of a niche sport probably, but it's very challenging. It's super dynamic. You're doing all these different disciplines: running, paddling, biking, fixed ropes, navigating with map and compass the whole way. It's not a marked course. The longer races, you're going nonstop, 5 to 10 days, racing through the night, figuring out where to sleep and how to take care of yourself and what to eat and all that kind of stuff. And typically with a 4-person co-ed team, which I'm a huge fan of team sports. So I love that team component. So anyway, I kind of, coming out of college, was able to get some good sponsorship deals and stuff over the years, and really focused on adventure racing for, almost the next 10 years or so there. In addition to, my life evolving as a high school teacher and getting married, starting to have kids in there again 12 years ago. And then that adventure racing led, also mixed in with snowshoe racing, ski mountaineering, really got into ultra running for a while there. A lot of endurance mountain biking, Leadville 100, 24-hour races, stage mountain bike races, et cetera, et cetera. And I had a couple years, I haven't done any this summer, but the 2 previous summers, I really got into this pack burro racing. I don't know if you've heard of that. Now, pack burro racing, that really is a niche sport. There's like 100 people in the world who do this thing, because basically you got to show up at a little high altitude town here in Colorado, Leadville, Fairplay, Buena Vista, places like that. And it's a high altitude trail running race, and everyone has a donkey, on a leash, more or less, or it's really a lead rope, right? So the donkey wears a halter. You got the lead rope, and you're running together again as a team, up and down mountains and minor roads and all that kind of stuff. And if you like intensity and redneck ruckus, and it's actually highly intellectual, because there's a lot of variables, there's a lot to figure out. So that's been one of my latest interests.
I love it. Redneck ruckus. Wonderful. Travis, you mentioned a few minutes ago working with a team, and you said it was a 4-person team, co-ed. Be really interested to hear some stories or some team dynamic of, it's 4 a.m., you're at mile 118, and you're just pissed off at each other. How do you get through that? How do you get through? Have you had those moments? 1, and then 2, when you do have those moments, how do you get through it?
Oh man, yeah, lots of it's something like adventure racing again, especially with sleep deprivation mixed in. You get 3, 4, or 5 days of very limited sleep, and you're not thinking straight. And I think some of it is just patience and perspective, and being able to realize, even in the heat of the moment when you feel absolutely terrible, and again, sleep deprivation, it's probably not a healthy thing. It's not something I do much anymore, but even in that moment, to realize like, oh, everything that someone says, they may not actually mean that. And if everyone on the team can, hopefully you've chosen teammates who have elements of their personality that are low key and relaxed, so that they can have some of that perspective, or to maybe a conflict occurs, but it can be quickly resolved, with an apology or with some responsibility. Usually that'll move things forward. You'll see, if people watch things like the Eco Challenge, or, especially some of the older Eco Challenges, which you can still find on YouTube, they often profiled teams where the interpersonal dynamic, went to shit for one reason or another. And often it was, because of that. People are just losing it, or they're not patient, they're not flexible, or and maybe there's a component of ego, oh, I'm the leader and I'm in charge and I get to make decisions, or you know, who knows what it is, or just the right or the wrong combination of personalities. That's actually something. You're thinking about it. Okay, you got 4 people here who are going to do this really hard stuff out there. Not only do we want to try to get the right combinations of expertise in the range of disciplines that we're going to compete in, to make sure, if you want to win the race, at least one person's got to be truly world class in each of the sports, even just from a safety standpoint. So not only do we have that, but hopefully we got the right combination of personalities as well.
I'm curious, in that team environment, are you training together, or do you train individually and then come together every once in a while to talk strategy? Or because I'm assuming you all don't live in the same neighborhood.
Yeah. Good question. It depends. You'll have some teams out there where, maybe they are local and they can train together a lot. Maybe you'll have a team where everyone lives in the same country, and leading up to a big event, they might be able to get together for, a few training weekends or something, where we go, let's do some, kind of mini missions. We set up our own course or whatever. Maybe there's training races. So you might say, oh, the big race is, whatever, the world championships or the eco challenge or something, but here's a few 24-hour races we can do together to prepare. And I would also say, at least in my experience, racing at that highest level, again, this is a pretty small, unique sport, and especially at the top level, it just happens leading up to a race. Someone gets hurt, or whatever, they have a job change, or they have a kid, like something happens, and here you are 2 weeks before you're racing whatever Australia, and you're like, oh shit, like who are we gonna get to be on our team? And you often, in those cases, it would be like you find someone who you've competed against, you've met at races, maybe they have a good skill set. Classically, the American teams at the last second would always call like an Aussie or a Kiwi, because they're really good paddlers, and they're just tough as nails, and they're fun. They're nice, jovial people, stereotypically, to hang out with. So, you get some fun Aussie to come hop in on your team, and maybe you've never literally, like, you've talked on the phone 3 times, and now let's go out and do an 8-day race together.
Awesome. That's awesome. Flipping the coin quickly, we've talked a lot about training and endurance. Let's also talk about recovery. Do you have any tips or tricks or best practices that you like to do with respect to recovery?
First, I just honor it. That's hopefully with wisdom and over time, just, we need to recover. And that also, as we age, or as we have different things going on in life, I would advise to any athlete, don't only look at your training load, whether you're looking in Training Peaks or Strava or your spreadsheet, or just thinking back on what you did over the last week or month. Like, don't only look at that. Look at your life as a whole, because, what are the hours you're working, the travel for work, the driving, driving kids to soccer practice, or driving to the tournament 6 hours away, and stress, psychological stress, stress from whatever, all of these things that happen in our life that add to psychological stress. I would say take stock of those, because those things are real, and often, especially for those of us who are, balancing or weaving endurance training and racing amidst a dynamic life with all this other stuff going on. I often find those things, like, they add to the stress load, can often be more from those kind of things. So first of all, look at those. Second of all, like, I'm not really into, hacks or tricks or tools. Like, I would say sleep. Sleep is huge. Like, that's probably the best thing. Drink a lot of water, eat a lot of good, healthy food, fuel sufficiently during your training and racing. Because when you're, endurance athletes will have seen a lot of these current trends in endurance fueling is, very high carbohydrate intake, and probably more sodium than we were taking in before, and more water. by fueling enough, or at times, overfueling, especially in a long session or a race or whatever, making sure we have maybe a little more than we need, we're going to break down a lot less. Like your recovery is so much better if you don't become depleted and dehydrated along the way. So do that. Eat good food when you're done. And again, even more than again, the latest trick or tool or whatever, just decreasing stress overall, trying to set up your life so as much as possible you have a sense of ease, a sense of routine, all that. And is that easy or straightforward? Like, hell no.
Yeah, I find that I have to.
I'm pretty stressed myself sometimes.
Right. You almost have to schedule it just as you do your long ride, your long run. It's, hey, this is the night that I'm going to hit the pillow at 6:30 p.m. and you stick to it.
Yeah. And I definitely, since my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I've done a whole lot less of like really early morning training missions, like even in my first book, there's a chapter, the 4:30 a.m. rule, because I used to get up at 4:30 a.m. all the time. And and now I've had to step back and think like, that may not be the best practice for my long-term cognitive wellness. Like how can I shift things around so I still do train, because it's really important to me, but also sleep more. So, that's been a priority of mine for sure. And I would also say, again, I just said, don't do the hacks and stuff, but every single day I spend at least 45 minutes doing yoga and, strength and range of motion and, that kind of stuff. But I also, at least for me personally, I try to just incorporate it into the like family routine. It's not like something where I like change clothes and go to the gym and, blah, blah, blah. It's like while I'm reading to my kids in bed, like I'm doing my crunches or I'm doing my, stretches with my little band thing that I do because they keep my back from falling apart and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Those multitasking opportunities become really, really valuable.
Yeah.
So one last question, Travis, what are you training for now? What's the next big race? Is there a big race on the horizon?
Not at the moment. And again, I don't know, maybe a sign of just the change or being flexible with identity over time. I mean, I went for 20 years where, dude, finish one race, man, the next one, it's coming in a month or 6 weeks, like year round, nonstop, no break ever. And I'm now at a point where I can actually feel okay. Like, I don't always have to have that. And it actually feels kind of good. I did the Leadville 100 mountain bike race a couple weeks ago. Now we're into kids soccer and I'm coaching the high school mountain bike team here in Salida. So I get to ride with those kids a day or two a week. And, honestly, my next sort of, physical or outdoor goal is, in November, I have an elk hunting tag, and that's something I've really enjoyed, pursuing, each year as well. And it is a physical event in many ways, and training and preparation are required. But there's a lot of uncertainty. You got to be flexible. You got to be creative, and you don't know what the outcome is going to be.
Right. Yeah. You got to take what the day gives you, right? It's very similar to race day. Something's going to go wrong and you just got to be prepared for it and have the right mindset. Travis, how can people get in touch with you or follow you? Like, what's your favorite social media platform?
Well, I don't know favorites. I don't really like social media, but the one that I use most consistently is Instagram. That's at Travis Macy, and typically each week when our podcast is called the Travis Macy Show. That comes out every Monday, and so usually on Instagram there'll be a post about that, and that's also any wherever they're listening to this podcast, they can find the Travis Macy Show. And then also just my website. I have a contact form on there. That's travismacy.com. And on that website is my coaching information, speaking information, and also the information about the books, The Ultra Mindset and A Mile at a Time, which are available in stores and on Amazon. They're both in print and audio and ebook format as well.
Fantastic. And we'll include those links into our show notes. And we do ask the audience members, if you got some value out of today's show, please like our show, like Travis's podcast, buy his books, follow him on Instagram. The way this community grows is by all of us talking about these stories. Travis, I've truly enjoyed the beginning of our conversation around the challenges with identity. And as I mentioned, I'm struggling with that at the moment, but
Yep.
you've given me some food there to
Yeah.
get through it.
Yeah.
And
And
then
sometimes, Greg, just walking through it, I mean, get out, going out there and just towing the line in the midst of us uncertainty, even if you don't know quite what it means or should mean or whatever, like, going through it. Sometimes that leads to, a bit of the renewed understanding.
Always. And I suspect it's going to feel like the first long distance race I did, and
Yeah.
all those
Yeah.
mysteries will come out. And so,
Yeah.
I'll certainly be sharing that. And then how as we just closed off talking about the importance of recovery, that I think had some real good fodder for our audience, because it is very easy just to stare at Training Peaks and just be like, oh, I got to do 16 hours today, and or 16 hours this week. Let me just blow
Yeah.
through it. And if you don't take care of the rest of your life, it doesn't really work out as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I might, I'll add one more concept, Greg. Again, this is,
Yeah.
I didn't make this up, but something I've heard people discuss is the idea of as we might as endurance athletes, you hear periodized training where you have a period where you're kind of focusing on something. Maybe that can apply to other areas of life as well. So, I think back to earlier this spring when our book came out, it helped me to think of that as this is a period where the thing that I'm really focusing on is this book release, and that means allocating time and resources into a lot of travel. I was gone every week. I had a trip for like 10 weeks or something, which I never do, and I don't really like to do, and I don't like leaving my family and home. But when I saw it as a period, it's like, this is one snapshot. And I also knew that it's not going to last forever, and book launches are fun. It's nice to experience the energy and excitement and, yada, yada. But also like it's fleeting, it's not always going to be like that. So I think that can be a good professional application of like, okay, right now, I really am buckling down to focus on, whatever listeners can answer, whatever that means to you. But it doesn't have to be forever. You're not going full gas with every single thing at all the time. You're choosing what can I go full gas on, specific times with different parts of your life. And that may balance, maybe as an athlete, many of the people I coach, it's like, oh, here's one period of the year where like, I don't want to look at Training Peaks and I don't want to hear from Coach Travis, right? Because I'm doing other stuff. And I'm like, hell yeah, go do your other stuff, and then when you want to come back and we'll be rolling again.
That's a great point. And one of the parts of that I struggle with as well is when the pedal isn't as far down.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're going slow or your life needs
Yep.
to be quote unquote busier. It's taking the time at that moment just to recognize that, hey, you know what? This is the reflection time, or this is
Yep.
the recoup or recovery time.
Yep.
But being meaningful and intentional about it versus just letting it happen to you is a stronger journey through it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome show, Travis. It was great to meet you.
Yeah, you too, Greg. Thanks for talking. Thanks for the thoughtful questions.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.